Alright, so we're back with another Payathon lesson. And in this one, I'm going to change it up a little bit, and I'm kind of going to free-form this a little bit more. So it's not going to be as structured. I haven't pre-planned anything. I just kind of have an end goal that I want to achieve, and I'm just going to go through the motions and try to achieve that end goal just using whatever Python code that I can come up with. So what is the end goal that we want to do? Well, I want to create some sort of renaming script that automatically renames objects for you based on what type of object it is, because that's one of the most painful things. As you know, if you do any kind of rigging or any kind of scene organization, sometimes it's just a pain in the ass trying to figure out, you know, like what to name your objects. And it's nice to have like a way to consistently and automatically name your object, so that if it finds a locator, it'll automatically, for example, name it _lock. If it finds a mesh, it might automatically name _geo. And if you had something like a joint, for example, so if I just create a joint here using this little joint script that I have, if I select the joint and I run the script, it'll automatically add this _jnt. But I just want this kind of one button solution, and it's not going to be perfect, you know, it's not going to, you know, give me the exact results each time, but at least it'll give me a good start. So I might be able to just kind of, in a basic way, just kind of rename this what I want, run the script, and it'll just add _geo, and maybe it'll add _01 _geo, just to kind of give it a bit of an index, so it's not going to, you know, clash with other objects. And maybe in the script itself, it can look for other objects named, you know, cube _01 _geo, and if it's found one, it can rename it to an index above. So maybe we could do a couple of few smart little things like that for this little script. Yeah, so I'm going to get into it. I'm going to use Pymel for this because, you know, I've been talking about Pymel the last couple of weeks. I just want to kind of go full steam ahead with using Pymel and just show you guys basically how you code in Pymel. And it's very similar to coding in maya.cmds. Tiny little differences. Yeah. And I might even use PyCharm for this. So yeah, let's jump over to PyCharm. Alright, so we're over here inside of PyCharm, and I've set up a simple project structure here, and I've just got the project Payathon, and I've got a little Python folder in there, and then I've got a little Python package named AutoRenamer, and I just created the AutoRenamer.py script. So it's all kind of nice and set up now that you know, I'm ready to go. It's ready to roll. And if you guys don't know how to set up a project and you don't know how to create, you know, a Python package or use PyCharm, I have the whole video kind of going over this whole process, and it's really simple, really easy. And there's just a few steps that you need to go through in order to get this all set up. And one of those steps is to make sure that inside of your preferences directory, you have this scripts folder, and inside there, you just need to have this user setup.py, and you can see inside my user setup.py, I'm actually specifying this project path all the way up till just before the packages. I've just got this Python folder. I'm kind of specifying that and just appending that into my sys path. And what this will allow is, this will allow Maya, when you run it, Maya will run the user setup.py when Maya first launches, and it'll append this path so that it has access to this project directory, this structure. So you guys just need to make sure you do that if you want to kind of code outside like I am going to for this example. And that's all that really is for that. And we're actually ready to roll and start coding something. So the first thing I actually like to do when I kind of come across a new project like this, just to make sure that it's all importing correctly, I'll just do print before I even do anything. Let's just print hello world and save. Always save this file. And come back here, and I can do something like from AutoRenamer import AutoRenamer. So why am I typing it like this? Well, if you look at the project structure, you can see that the package itself is called AutoRenamer. And what I want to do is import from within this package this auto renamer script. So that's why I have to specify, from auto renamer, import auto renamer. So that's just what that's about. And if I run this now, you can see it's imported just fine, but it's not printed anything out. So that's because I've been playing around with this in memory already. Sometimes you'll find that you get an error when you try to import. If you already had Maya session open, sometimes it errors out, sometimes it doesn't print, what you want. You can always reload the script, or if you just wanted to be sure that it's all working, you can just close down Maya and just reboot it, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'm just going to wait for it to close out, and I'm going to just boot up Maya again. I'm on Linux, so I prefer to actually launch my applications using a terminal. But if you guys are on Windows, just close and reopen. So now that it's reloaded, because it's kind of refreshed the entire Python interpreter, the Python session. If I run this, you can see it prints hello world. So what we don't want to do is have to close Maya and reopen it each time I make a change to the script. So ideally what we do is we're able to update this somehow. So the quickest way to do that is actually just to reload auto renamer. And what this will do is reload this script here. So this particular script here. So once it reloads, it'll kind of update itself to be the latest version. So we don't have to close and reopen Maya each time. So just to prove that it works. Now if I come here and change hello world, maybe I'll just say hello Bob and save, and I run this script. You can see it says hello Bob because we've reloaded the script, so all good. And maybe if I change this to John, just to quickly show the example, to really beat it in, and a reload, you can see it says hello John now. So this is what we want. But reload has some issues, and you just want to be careful when you're using it, especially when you're using classes and class inheritance, which we're not going to be using much, I don't think, in this little example. So don't need to worry about that just yet. So what are the requirements for this script? I'm just going to quickly write it down inside of this script itself. So we have a good thing to refer to each time we want to kind of figure out what to do next. I can kind of look at this list of requirements that we want for the script and then kind of check it off as we go. So the script itself is called auto renamer, and I'm just going to put what I need to do here, and we'll clean this up in a bit. But what this is just a doc string. So the 3 quotations and the 3 quotations there, anything in between there is just the doc string. So I'm just writing the doc string for the entire document, and it's just kind of like a comment where you can just comment on what the script actually does and just write all sorts of random stuff. But I kind of use this as a way to just manage what I need to do. So, well, first the script needs to automatically rename objects based on object type. So that's the first thing we need to do. So that already lets us know that yes, we need to kind of figure out the object type and then use a naming convention based on that. And then the next thing I want to do is maybe use some sort of indexing system. So index object name, so there's no conflicts in the naming. And I'm just going to do 01, 02, 03 as an example of what that indexing means. So this is the next thing we need to do. And let's see, maybe the last thing is we'll even prefix the object. Let's see, is it worth prefixing an object? Maybe not. Let's just leave it as these 2 things for now. And yeah, let's begin. So first thing I want to do is import pymel.core as PM, just to make sure that I have access to all the Pymel code. It's kind of like importing maya.cmds, very same step. And I know I want some sort of function that does renaming. So rename object. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out the skeleton of this code. I know there'll be a few different types of things that I want to perform, a few different actions. So I'll need a few different functions, and I want to keep my functions as simple as possible. So I don't want a giant function that does everything. I kind of want to split the function up into little segments so that one function just handles one single thing. And that's a concept in programming known as the single responsibility. And you try to make everything just have one responsibility and do one thing rather than try to do many things. So in here, I'm just going to have a bunch of different functions that handle just one little thing. So here, this function here might be to get next index. So what get next index is going to relate to this index object name. So it's going to figure out what the index should be for the object. So when you run this, it'll try to figure that out. And then we might have something, let's see. So we need to rename the object, we need to get the index, we need to figure out the object type. So here we can have object suffix. Maybe get object suffix or just object suffix. Object suffix is probably a little bit more shorter, so I'll use just object suffix. So this will be based on the object type. We'll figure out what the object suffix should be. So I'll just hit pass there. So this is the basic skeleton of my code. Nothing crazy. So you can see that it's just there. Maybe it'll grow the number of functions that I have, but for now, I just know that I need to rename the object. And before I rename the object, I need to get the index and also need to get the object suffix. And then finally, I'll do the renaming of the object. So this is gonna kind of be the master function, the function that kind of runs these two little functions within it in order to rename the object. And to rename the object, well, we'll need to accept an object to rename first. So I'm just gonna put, maybe I'll just put, let's see, what should we rename object? And I might actually do one more little thing. I might actually create another function called rename selection. And might even call this auto rename selection. And here I'll call this auto rename object. So in this auto rename selection is where I'm going to figure out the selection that I have, and then that'll run auto rename object. It'll probably loop, it'll create a loop based on the selection, and for each loop it'll run auto rename object. So here is where I can say my selection is equal to pm.selected, and pm.selected is just a way to get my selection. And then I want to, for I in cell, I want to run auto rename object, and I want to pass auto rename object I. You can see it's complaining here because here we don't actually have an input that it can accept. So let's accept an input. Let's just call this obj, or obj to rename, just so it's nice and explicit. So now, what do we want to do next? Well, first we probably want to get the object suffix. So I'm going to put object suffix, and I'm going to pass it the object to rename. So what it's going to happen now is once we run this, we get our selection. For each selection, we'll do auto rename object, and inside auto rename object, we'll take that object and we'll give it to this object suffix function. And what the object suffix function will do is get this suffix for the object. So here we can put just obj, keep it nice and simple, and we need to get the suffix. So what I probably want to do is have a suffix table, like so. So in the suffix table, what I want to actually have here is a way to define, a list of objects, and within that list will be a corresponding suffix associated with it. So something that's really cool in Pymel that you can do is you can check object types using a little function known as isInstance, like this. And what this will do, this isInstance function, it's built into Python. What this will do is check if one object is, an instance of another, of an object type. So it basically means, hey, is it this object type, or is it a child object type of that particular type? It sounds a little bit confusing, but it will make a lot more sense in a bit. So So what I'm going to use is pm.dt, and what dt means is data type, or you can use nt. I think I'm going to use nt because we're going to check node types, not data types. So I want to check a node type, and let's just put mesh there for now. And then what I want to specify in this dictionary is if something is a mesh, then what we want to do here is we want to have a particular suffix associated with that. So let's say _geo. If it's a mesh, then the suffix should be _geo. I'm just going to put a little comma there just so we can start a new line and maybe do something like NURBS. So if it's a NURBS surface, it's also _geo. So we'll just start there for now. And then what I can do is say let's just say for nt for node type, for node type, as well as suffix in suffix table dot items. So what this means is we're gonna iterate over the items in the suffix table. So we have, this is one item here, this is another item, and inside those items we have a node type and a suffix. So this is the suffix here, the string, and then this is the particular node type. So we're actually kind of looping over this table, this dictionary in twos. So we're going like this, and then the next one like this, and then if we have more, it'll just keep going down like so. And then we're going to take the node type and we're going to say is instance, and then we're going to say the object is the object and instance of the node type. So it's basically checking if this object is this particular type, this particular node type up here. And if it is, then we'll do something. So I can say if it is an instance, then we'll return suffix. So what this means is if it's a particular node type and it's true, it matches that node type, it'll return this suffix there, and then this suffix will return and it'll get returned up in here. So what we can do is we can store that. So we can say suffix is equal to object suffix. So now we've stored it. Now we have a way to rename our object, and we have a way to just kind of reference this suffix that we want. And then we can add to this as we go, but I just want to kind of go through this quickly, and we can kind of flesh this out more as we go, because right now I'm just considering two types of objects, but eventually we'll want to consider way more types of objects than this, so we can have different suffixes for different types of objects. But right now we're just going to test it on meshes. We can do a quick test already just by printing suffix and seeing if it worked. So I'm just going to save this file. Let's switch back over to Maya. And then what I want to do here is auto renamer dot auto rename selection. And then that just matches this function here. So we're calling this function here inside of Maya. And it's going to grab our selection. It's going to do all those cool things. So let's create a cube first of all. So we have a mesh type. And then what I want to do is actually just select the shape, just because I want the shape node. Otherwise it'll be a node type transform. But I actually want the node type to be a mesh or a NURBS surface. So I need to actually select this. And we can actually add something in the code later on so that it will automatically check the shape if you have the transform node selected. So I'll run this and let's see what happens. Okay, so it says none. So it actually didn't work. It actually didn't, the instance didn't pass. So let's see what happened there and why it didn't work. Let's see. So we're printing suffix here and it returned none. So we're printing none. So something's going on in this code here which is failing. So it's failing this check here for whatever reason. So first of all, I want to just check that the node type that it's printing and the suffix that it's printing that we're looping over is actually what we expect. Okay, so and then last thing I want to do is sometimes I do something like print here just to check that the code actually made it to this step. All right, so we can rerun this code and see what happens. I'll select this shape again and let's run it. Okay, so it actually worked. So maybe I just had the wrong thing selected. So it looks like it's actually worked and it's returning underscore geo. But when I have the transform selected, it's not going to work because we're not checking for the transform object type name. So it's just a neat little way to check, is just to print some things here and there just to check that the code is actually working. But it seems like the code is actually working and I just had the wrong thing selected there. Okay, cool. So it's working so far. So what do we want to do next? Let's get the index. So we can get an index on an object and then rename it by that index, adding that index into the name somewhere. So this is a little bit more complicated because we kind of have to check existing objects and make sure that there's not going to be a conflict, and if there is, it'll automatically name it with one index up. So I think the pattern that I want these names to be is, let's just say naming convention. So I just want to kind of establish the naming convention that I want to go with before I start writing the code, just so I have something to refer to always and make sure that I'm adhering to that naming convention. So let's see, here I might say name. Let's just put like a generic name like this, and then I want to do underscore 01 for my index, and then underscore geo for the type. So this will be the kind of naming convention that I have. So if I name this cube like Bob, for example, I want the script to automatically say Bob01 underscore geo. And if I had a joint, it'll do the same. It'll be Bob01 underscore joint, etc. And that's kind of how I want this naming thing to work. It's just a nice, easy way to auto rename stuff, so that as I'm modeling, as I'm rigging and creating tons of objects inside of my outliner, I can easily just select them all and just make sure they're named properly, and then just run the script and it'll automatically add all the indexes and the suffixes for the type of object it is. So let's go to the index here now. So what do we want to do when this get index is run? So we probably want to get the index here first. So we can say idx is equal to get next index, and I want to pass the object to rename in order to get the next index. And then let's have a look in here. Let's see what the we probably need to figure out the object name, the full object name first before we can get the index. So I probably don't actually want to pass the object name, the object to rename there. I think what I actually need to do is get the final name here first, and then we can modify this final name with the correct index. So I think the final name would be something like, let's just do some string formatting, and let's just do format. And what do I want it to be? I want it to be the object name itself. So I can put object to rename dot node name. So to grab the node name, we format it so the node name's there first, and we do 01 just as a starting point, and then we want to put the suffix back there. So actually want to put suffix there. All right, so now we have the name, just a base name. We're just using 01 for now, and I can pass 01 to name here. So what this will mean is we're going to look at this name, and we're going to, based on this naming convention, we'll modify this middle section, this middle token there, to see if an object actually exists of that nature, and if it does, we'll up number this. So maybe we can make this even cleaner. I think I might change this code a little bit. Instead of doing the string formatting here, I'll do it a little bit later. What I probably want to do is just have my names as separate objects, separate tokens to begin with. So rather than doing all this fancy jazz, what I might actually do is I'll just store this entire section inside of a tuple. So let's just store it inside of there like this. And I think this is kind of what we want first of all. So we have a nice little tuple here, and then we pass name token to this get next index. And in here we can say, we can accept a name token, and then based on that we can figure out what the next index is. So we can do something like pm.pynode. So what Pynode does is it tries to define a Pymel node using a string. So it's, if I pass a string here, so if I say something, just to show you guys how it works, if I create an object, so I've got this cube here and I name this object, let's just call it foo. And I'll just come down here just to show you guys an example. I'll do pm.pynode and I'll type foo. If I run this, what this would do is I'll just deselect everything. So it's nice and clear what happens. When I run this, you can see it generates a Pymel object. It automatically found something named foo and it's kind of wrapped it in a Pymel object. And it's just a nice way to kind of convert strings into Pymel objects. And Pymel objects have some very unique features which you can use later on, and you'll see later on why we want to get this to become a Pymel object. And if something doesn't exist by that name foo, so if I delete this and I try to run this, you can see it'll error out. It'll give me a Maya node error. So it doesn't like that at all. Okay, so this will be incredibly useful later on when we check. Actually, we'll use it right now. So what I'm gonna actually do is I'm gonna use string formatting here, like so. And I want to do format, I'm going to do name token 01. So the first name token and the second part of the name token. So it'll just be taking the object name as it is currently, as well as the suffix, and it'll generate this new object name. And it'll try to look for this, object name. And if it finds this object name, then it means the object exists, so there won't be an error. If it doesn't find this object, then it's going to error out and we're going to have an issue. So I'm just kind of trying to create a Pymel object and use it as a way to check if the object exists or not. So, but I want this number to change dynamically. So I just want to say while, let's just say while true. We use a while loop so we can just keep looping upwards until infinity, more or less. And it's a little bit dangerous, so I don't want to run any code yet whilst this while loop is there. And I just want to create a variable to begin with. So maybe I'll start off by putting idx as a variable. We'll just start off as 0. So index is 0. And then what I want to do here is probably just increase this. So we do this, and in here we put idx as well, so it's using that index, and it's adding it in the middle there. Alright, and we'll deal with the O1, the padding, later on, but for now I just kind of want to, just up index each time it loops. So this will just loop infinitely, and then what I actually want to do is say try to cast this string to a Pynode, and if it fails, I'm going to do except pm.maya node error. You can see this is the error that we get there. So what's going to happen is when we try to create this thing here, if it errors out, what it's going to do is now we know which index is available because that object won't actually exist. Okay, so that's why we kind of want to cast it to the string. If it doesn't exist, then I know that index is good to use. If it does exist, that means that index is already taken. So what I want to do now is just return idx because we know that index is good to use. Else if it doesn't error out, what we want to do is up index. So plus equals 1. What this is going to do is it's going to take the existing index value, and it's starting off at 1. It's going to take the existing index value and it's going to increase it by 1. So it's going to increment it by 1. And each time this runs, it's going to keep incrementing it up until we get an error that this object doesn't exist, and then we know that this index is good to use. Okay, so that's just a neat little trick in order to find the index. All right. So I think this is working all now. So we've got the name token, we've also got the index. Finally, the last thing to do is just pm.rename. Let's rename the object to rename, and let's construct the new name here. Let's do format. Let's do the name token. First part of the name token, then we got the index, and then finally we got the suffix, and here we can put our underscores and also, whoops, fill in the blanks there just by putting these placeholders. All right, so I think this is all working now. The last thing is to just test all this code out and make sure it's actually gonna work. So I got my fingers crossed because I got this while loop here, so it's a little bit dangerous. You know, it can just infinitely loop and potentially crash my machine at some point, but it looks like all the code's working, so I think we're clear to try. So what's gonna happen is I expect this to change the name from Bob Shape to Bob Shape _1_geo. That's kind of what I'm expecting. So if I run this, and look, it's kind of worked, but not really. It's _0__geo. So that's not exactly what I wanted to happen. And there's a few things, and I know why. It's because in our suffix we have underscore here, which we actually don't need. So I'm going to remove that. So that should fix the double underscore because it's adding one underscore. It's already got a one underscore here and it's adding another one from there. So we can get rid of that. And the next thing is we're starting the index off at 0. So that's why it's taking 0 as the first value. We can actually just start the index off at 1. So now it should actually do what I expect. So I'm going to run this. There we go, Bob shape _1_geo. Awesome. Yeah, so quite a lot to take in there. So I might just end this video here, but as you can see, you can do some cool things with just the renaming, this auto renamer. I think I'm going to continue this auto renamer script so we can get a little bit more advanced, so that we can actually just select the transform node and it'll automatically determine if the transform is actually a mesh or not by looking at the shape, and it'll rename the transform instead so that you don't have to rename the shape node like that. And we probably do some other more interesting things like add some padding, so it'll be O1, and it really just depends on your preference. Some people might just like it going from 1 without any padding. Some people might like to have, you know, padding of 3 like that. Some people might not. Might want like 4 padding even, but we'll figure out a way to add the padding in afterwards. But yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned some things about Pymel, especially this casting to Pymel, and you know, a bit of error checking by trying to cast it. If it errors out, then you know, we'll do some operation. If it doesn't error out, we'll do another operation, and just a little bit more about like single responsibility by trying to make your functions do as little as possible and rather just string together multiple functions in order to do something. So yeah, I'll finish this code off next time, but yeah, make sure you guys stick around.